So many of us are now using AI tools in a lot of our workflows, and rightly so. But I want to talk about what I think are three big challenges, mostly because over the coming days and weeks, I'm going to start to share my solutions and answers for these. So, three big challenges I think are the shared memory problem, the vendor lock in problem, which the two are kind of related, and access and control issues. So, let's dig into each one of them just briefly. So, the shared memory problem is that ultimately you go from different contexts using different AI tools. So you may be using like Gemini CLI here, and then Gemini in the web, and then Codex, and then ChatGPT, and then Claude Code CLI. Now you're using all these different environments, but there is no shared memory between them. And in fact, those companies are kind of disincentivized to make that happen because they are trying to lock you in, right? Which leads to essentially the second problem, the vendor lock in problem. Because if you don't solve the shared memory issue soon, you start to get locked into, this particular chat interface or this particular LLM. It knows a lot about you. It's kind of helpful because it's got the shared memory about you. That's why you can often ask these things, tell me something about myself, and it can explain a lot of your personality traits that it has observed, obviously through patterns. So this vendor lock-in issue is, the core of it, or the problem with it, is that the different vendors are constantly tuning these systems, and that's why one day the system will seem great, the next day it'll seem bad. There's obviously different loadings. The plans are all changing so quickly because the vendors, the major ones like your Anthropic, your Google, Microsoft, ChatGPT, basically they are all burning money. They're burning cash and they're burning energy until they can kind of get us locked in, and obviously then paying for these services. So the vendor lock-in problem is one that you should be considering how to solve like right now. The other one is access and control. And what am I talking about here? Well, I think the most obvious thing is to talk about the difference between like a web LLM interface and like a CLI driven interface. And I guess this is probably the tip in this video, and that we'll dig into further later, is that basically, the web LLM interfaces, they're starting to build out connectors and things and integrations through APIs, but ultimately they can't run as authoritatively as you sitting on a machine logged into all of your platforms with your files accessible. That environment is extremely powerful, that CLI environment on your machine. And that's obviously where, you can quickly build custom MCPs, you can connect to different data sets, you can start building a more tailored framework, which I will be sharing my framework as well in the near future. So what we're getting at here is that there are fundamental differences between what an AI or an LLM can achieve based on the context that it's running in. It may be running inside of a product and can only touch the data from that product. It may be running in the web and it can touch, websites and other kind of shared contexts, or it may be running in like a very trusted environment, CLI. And probably another very recent trend is like obviously sandboxing and making sure that if you're going to run a CLI interface and you're worried about, Gemini or Claude or someone deleting all your files, then you actually spin up a Docker container or something and you run the CLI inside of that, and you're only giving it, permissioned access to different things that you want it to see. So they're the three big issues that I see. The shared memory issue, and the shared memory issue is ultimately about you're now using all these different platforms, but you haven't yet solved the problem of how can I capture all this into one place that I control, that I can search, and how can I do it easily from any interface, whether it's web or command line. And I have an answer. I'm going to be sharing it in a coming video. The vendor lock-in problem, it's always been the same, right? But basically it's becoming more pertinent now than ever because, Google's not just, let's say, holding your emails and your identity and stuff. Whichever one of these LLMs stacks that you're choosing, you you're having all these conversations with it. It's learning about you, and you're getting, it's potentially stuck. Now, I think the trend will be towards locally hosted LLMs in the future. Obviously, that's going to be very dependent on hardware costs, but we're starting to see it with some of the machines that Apple is releasing, the studio machine thing that can run locally. And then the access and control problem. So depending where I'm running my AI workflows and workloads, you'll have different access and be able to achieve different success rates. So look out for upcoming videos where we'll share more tips on how to solve these challenges.